So, when I say the words biblical prophecy, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For a lot of us, it's probably these complicated charts and timelines, all trying to predict some kind of distant future. But what if that's barely scratching the surface? Today, we're going to dive into a totally different way of reading these ancient texts, one that I think reveals something way, way deeper. And that really gets us to the big question for this whole explainer. Were the prophets basically just ancient fortune tellers? Or is there something richer, something more immediate, woven into everything they said? Yeah, we're definitely going to explore that something more. Okay, so let's jump right in. The very first step, and this comes from scholar Dr. Marv Wilson, is pretty simple. We have to put down the summaries and go straight to the source. You know, if we really want to get what the prophets were talking about, we have to actually read their words for ourselves, not just through somebody else's filter. So, here's what we're going to do. We're going to trade in the whole crystal ball idea for a scholar's lens. Instead of just hunting for predictions, we're going to zero in on a couple of key principles for how to read this stuff. Trust me, making this one little shift is the key that unlocks a much more profound understanding. And this is so important to get. Before any prophecy could ever be about the future, it had to mean something to the people hearing it right then and there. The prophets weren't just making predictions. They were delivering these incredibly urgent messages about how to live, about justice, and about finding hope for the people standing right in front of them. This brings us to our first, and honestly, our most important principle. You can think of this as the number one, non-negotiable, foundational rule for reading any prophetic text. It's a huge ethical guide. And here it is. Eschatology does not annul justice. Now, eschatology is just a fancy word for the study of end times. So what this means is huge. No belief about the future, no prophecy can ever be used as an excuse to be unjust today. It can't be used to justify harming people, taking their land, anything that violates their basic human dignity. And this isn't some new idea. It's got deep roots in the ancient Jewish principle of pikuach nefesh. The concept is actually really simple, but it's also incredibly profound. It just means that preserving a human life is the absolute highest moral duty. It trumps just about any other religious law or ritual. And get this, the Bible itself is packed with examples of this principle in action. You've got Jesus healing on the Sabbath, David's hungry men eating bread that was supposed to be sacred. The stories show us over and over again that taking care of human needs and saving a life always comes before the strict letter of the religious law. The principle is baked right into the narrative. All right, let's move on to our second principle, because this is where it gets even more fascinating. This one's all about how a single prophecy can actually grow and expand in what it means over the course of history. It's this idea of multiple or progressive fulfillment. So a prophecy can have a really direct, concrete meaning for the people who first heard it right there in their own time. And then, maybe generations later, that exact same prophecy can find a new, deeper, fuller expression in some future event. It's not an either-or thing, it's a both-and. And of course, scholars have a name for this. It's called sensus plenior. It literally just means the fuller sense. It's this idea that a text can have a depth of meaning that you can only really see or understand once you have the benefit of hindsight from later events. Okay, let's look at a classic example to make this crystal clear. The prophet Hosea, he's speaking for God about the Exodus story, and he writes this simple little phrase, "Out of Egypt I called my son." Now, in its original context, that son is clearly the nation of Israel, God's chosen people that he brought out of slavery in Egypt. It's a historical callback. But then centuries later, the Gospel of Matthew quotes this exact same verse and applies it to Jesus after his family comes back from Egypt. See what's happening? The second use doesn't erase the first one. It fills it up, revealing its deepest, or plenior, meaning. Okay, so you with me? We've got our two big principles locked in. Justice first, always, and meaning can deepen over time. Now, let's do a quick case study to see how these tools can totally change how we read a story we all think we know. So, let's talk about Jonah. Come on, be honest. When you hear the name Jonah, what's the first image that pops into your head? I'd bet money it's a giant fish, right? We get so hung up on the miracle of the fish that we're in danger of missing the entire point of the book. Because really, this isn't a story about a big fish at all. It's a story about a big God. The fish is just the transportation, It's the vehicle that gets us to this really profound theological point. So, what is that point? Well, it's this incredibly radical, challenging story about how huge God's compassion is. Jonah is sent to Nineveh, the capital of Assyria. I mean, these guys were Israel's most brutal, hated enemy. And that's the message. God's love isn't just for one tribe, it extends even to the people we see as our worst foes. And that's the whole takeaway. When we stop obsessing over the details of the fish and start reading for the principle underneath it all, that message about a just and compassionate God, that's when the true depth of this story finally clicks into place. And that really leaves us with something to chew on, doesn't it? When we shift our focus away from just looking for predictions and start reading for these deeper principles, how does it change what we see? What other big God stories have we missed because we were only looking at the big fish?